saw the title, you know what it is. Today we're making a simple peach mead. I'm going to start by using a wildflower honey, a little black tea for tannins, and a little lemon for acidity if we need it. I'm also going to be using canned peaches for this one, starting by sanitizing a little half-gallon mason jar, and I'm just going to bust open this can here with a little can opener. Personally, I'm not a big peach guy. Not a big fan of peaches, but this was requested specifically by one of my friends for his birthday, so let's just give it a shot. I'm going to pour in this whole can into my little half-gallon fermenter. You can use fresh peaches, which I actually might recommend doing, but I'll tell you later why I think canned peaches might not have been the move here. But I'm just going to add in these whole, and I ended up using 2 cans here. Adding them, I probably should have added all of our honey in first and mixed it. And I'm making a huge mess, and you can basically see I'm already pretty much close to out of headroom. These peaches claim to have 77 grams of sugar per can. But that's not quite enough, so I'm going to add a little bit more sugar. And for that, I'm going to be using a little bit of Kirkland wildflower honey that I picked up from the fine people at Costco. Based on my calculations, I'm adding about 365 grams of sugar to this jar to make it a mead. And I'm already out of headroom, so this is going to be hard to mix, hard to incorporate. In hindsight, I probably should have just added 1 can and then mixed it and then added the other one. But regardless, I'm going to power through and just put on this lid and very, very, very gracefully just screw it on. And we're going to do our best here to mix this up and try to make it a homogeneous fluid so we can get an accurate reading for our sugar value. But here are the glorious slow-mo shots of me attempting to incorporate the honey the best I can. And those peaches are looking real good now, but the whole peaches, while they look really nice, they make it a bit difficult to mix. So it's also going to result in a lot of volume being wasted. So I'm not expecting a huge yield on this one, which is fine because again, I don't really like peaches. So this bottle will just be for my friend. I'm adding a little bit of black tea to the top, and I'm doing my best to add as little water here as possible since I'm already close to out of headroom, but the amount of water technically shouldn't matter since all it's going to do is just make a super concentrated tea, which is totally fine here. I'm just adding a tablespoon of tea and dissolving it in some hot water, and this is going to add a lot of tannin to this brew. And again, here's a glorious little slow-mo shot. I always really like these, but again, there's no headroom, so this is again, really hard to incorporate this and make sure it is homogeneous. But after a little bit of time, it's homogeneous enough for us to do our first gravity reading. And I was aiming for about a 22 Brix value, which would normally yield us around 12 to 13% ABV. I'm going to go ahead and test this with our refractometer. And our reading has come out to a cool 35, which is really high. So somebody lied to me. Either the honey or the peaches had way more sugar in them than advertised. I'm thinking maybe the peaches just didn't account for the fluid. They were talking about just the peaches, or I did my math wrong. Either way, we're going to have to add this much water into our must in order to dilute our must here to a more reasonable sugar concentration. To do that, I'm going to have to pour some of this out. So I'm just going to use this little strainer here to try my best to reduce our volume and pour out some of this fluid. And you can see it is just pouring like syrup here. It is so thick. And this peach liquid was already very thick in the first place. And it's one of those things I think with using canned fruit. Canned fruit is pasteurized, meaning they heat it to a high temperature to kill off any bacteria or yeast or anything from growing. But in that process, it can sometimes set the pectin. And similar to if you make a jelly or jam, when you heat fruit with a lot of acid and a lot of sugar in it, it will turn it into a jelly, like a jelly consistency. And the same thing is going to happen in our brew, where we might get a very hazy and cloudy beverage. And you often hear people talking about adding a pectic enzyme, which breaks down those pectin molecules and will hopefully give you like a clearer wine. I didn't do it for this one because I want to make it very beginner friendly, but it is totally a fair and valid thing to do if you so desire. Testing our sugar again, we are reading 23 Brix, which is a lot more like it. That is perfect. I'm also going to test the pH, which is looking like about 4, which is also perfect. Looks like we don't need to add any lemon to this. It is already acidic enough, which means it is now time for our yeast. And for our yeast, I am using bread yeast. That is right. I'm using bread yeast, and if you got a problem with that, you can go ahead and call the yeast police on me. And while you got them on the phone, you might as well call the airlock police on me because I am using an airlock like this. It is a waterless airlock, and I've actually had good success with them in the past. They let air out, they still don't let anything in. I think it's going to be fine. The reason I'm choosing bread yeast for this is because my idea is I'm hoping that this is actually going to stall at around 10 to 11%, which bread yeast sometimes tend to do. This way I don't have to stabilize or pasteurize. I can just break the yeast by pushing it past its natural alcohol tolerance. But after a few days, it's already time to rack, and I'm expecting a lot of loss. I'm racking this into this old Jim Beam bottle that I have, and it's been cleaned and sanitized, but it looks pretty big, but the volume's actually about 2/3 the volume of my half-gallon mason jar, so I'm hoping that it'll be just the perfect fit for us, and ideally leave us little to no headroom at all. But I think I might have been a little bit ambitious here with how much yield we were actually going to get out of this. Looking at it now, it kind of looks like orange juice. Filling up this Jim Beam bottle, there was so much volume sucked up by these peach slices that I wasn't able to get a lot of liquid out of it. And it was also siphoning so thick as well, which seems like it might be a problem. I'm just going to try to strain out any residual liquid from these peaches. And you can see our clarity here is basically 0. Part of the reason is because we were using whole fruits, and they have a tendency to float right to the top because the gas will just build up inside of them, and so they'll become very buoyant. And if you're using whole fruits, you kind of want to constantly mix it so that the fruit will stay wet and doesn't dry out. Otherwise, things like mold and stuff can grow on top of them if you let the fruit dry out. So constantly mixing it gets rid of any chance for clarity during our primary fermentation. And you can see right here just how thick this mead is already. It is dripping like slime, like syrup or something again, and it looked like there was so much liquid left in this jar, but after filtering it out, this little measuring cup we were only able to salvage about 4 ounces out of this jar. But I'm gonna do my best because we waste nothing here. You can also eat these peaches too if you want to, but they're pretty gross because there's no sugar left in them, so they're pretty gnarly, but I did try one. And although it wasn't much, 4 ounces is enough to give this a quick little taste. And tasting it, it's gross. It's completely dry. But we will just confirm that with a quick test. With our refractometer, we are reading a 7.5, which does mean we went dry. Those peach notes are there. It smells very alcoholic, but flavor-wise, you need sweetness to balance this out. So to back sweeten, we're adding a little bit more of this honey, this wildflower honey. I'm going to start by just adding 20 grams into this 4 ounces, and by doing that I can extrapolate, if I like it, how much sugar to add into our main batch, our full batch. So I can use this little 4 ounces of liquid to calculate how much sweetness I think we need. I'm just going to mix this up very thoroughly, and I'll just take out a little sample here, and after tasting it real quick, it's pretty good. It's a little on the sweet side, but I think sometimes that's desirable with meads because people are anticipating a honey flavor, which is sweet. I don't think people, I think especially my friend here, I think he's going to want this fruity peach mead to be a little on the sweet side. So I'm going to go ahead and move forward. For reference, I added about 10 Brix of sweetness. So we went to 17.5. I'm now transferring this must into its third home now, and the reason I liked this Jim Beam bottle in the first place was because I can fit my auto siphon in here, but there's just too much headroom, so I'm moving it into this other little bottle that I have, which is hopefully the right amount of volume without having a bunch of headroom. The only problem is I can't fit my auto siphon into this bottle anymore, so racking it might be a challenge. I left a little bit of space on the top, so I have room to add my honey, you see. I'm thinking, and after doing a little bit of calculations, I figure I need to add about 160 grams of honey to this. So with the scale out, I'm just going to ever so carefully add our honey into our mead here, and we're slowly reducing our headroom. But I'm also just going to add a little more liquid in here since my auto siphon can't sit flat in this Jim Beam bottle and I can't really get it in like the corner. So I'm just going to use this little funnel and my third and fourth hand here to carefully and gently pour it in without trying to oxygenate. And if you don't have an auto siphon at home, this is a fine way to do it. The idea with the auto siphon is that you're trying not to oxygenate your brew, which you do not want to do at this stage. And in the spirit of not oxygenating, I need an airlock, but with this bottle, I can't fit my traditional airlocks on here. So I'm going to try the balloon method, which I've never done before, but is a valid way to let your gases escape without letting any oxygen in. And again, is a great way to do it at home if you don't want to buy any special supplies. Now, I think you're supposed to poke a hole in it, but I didn't because I kind of wanted to see if this fermentation would kick off again, and it did. And we actually got this really nice separation here of these particulates flocculating out of our solution and creating this really weird gelatinous blob forming at the bottom. And it looks pretty gnarly, but our liquid is looking good, so that bodes well for our clarity here. So it is time that I now just gently remove this balloon, and it is ready to rack. I'm going to just breathe in a little bit of this CO2 that tastes like peach and alcohol for some reason. And now, like I said, my auto siphon doesn't fit in this bottle, so we're going to have to siphon this the old-fashioned way, and I'm just sucking it up with my mouth at the end of the tube. Ideally, you don't want to do this because you don't want to introduce things from your mouth into the brew, but I'm sucking it from the outside and then I'm adding it to this bottling wand. So the part that touches my mouth never actually touches the liquid. That's the idea anyway. I can't legally recommend you try it this way, but in my head, this all made sense, and sometimes you just got to get it done. I'm transferring it here into this bottle, which I thought would have looked very nice for presentation purposes, and giving it to my friend. But in the end, there was just a little bit too much headroom. We didn't get enough yield out of it. So I'm transferring it from its fourth home into hopefully its fifth and final home, which is just this little 16-ounce bottle that I usually use for these brews anyway. So I think it all worked out. Once again, using my mouth siphon technique here again. I don't recommend doing this. I just couldn't lie to you guys. I wanted to give you the honest, the uncut, the unfiltered story of how I actually got this mead from one bottle into another. But honestly, pouring it might have been a safer move than trying to introduce bacteria from your mouth. So do as I say, not as I do. But I got it going, and now we are cooking. We are moving this liquid, and just look at that clarity. It's actually turned out a lot better than I thought. It's looking pretty good. We were able to get one whole bottle, plus what I would say is a very full glass over here. So not the highest yield, which I was expecting, but I got one whole bottle and a little glass for me to taste. So this turned out really nice. You know, bread yeast gets a lot of flack for not flocculating well, meaning it doesn't really have great clarity, but I think these results speak for themselves. It also kicked off again during its secondary fermentation, bringing us back down to 12 Brix, which backed off some of the sweetness and I think dialed it into a place that was actually perfect. It also increased our ABV, which netted us a tremendous 16.9% ABV, which is, I think, just incredible for bread yeast. Unheard of, maybe. I think this surpassed all of my expectations for bread yeast. So if you've been feeling a little, I don't know, a little scared to try some bread yeast, I think these results might speak for themselves. This tastes great. I mean, I'm not a big peach fan, like I said, but it's hard to deny these results. This came out incredibly aromatic. It tastes mostly like a traditional mead, but it has these peach notes in it that complement everything really well, and it really melds together. It has a great mouthfeel with just an exceptional body. It's peachy on the front end, and it just has a tremendously smooth finish. Overall, I could not be happier with how this one turned out. So if you like peaches, highly recommend trying this one at home. Anyway, I'm gonna go finish this glass and let me know what I should make next.